It is my pleasure to welcome in our first guest this morning. His name is Grant Callen. Grant is the founder and CEO of Empower Mississippi. We've got a lot to get to. I know that many of you, because he's been on this program and others at SuperTalk for a long time, know Grant already or know Grant's story already. I am just getting to know Grant. We had a really good visit, or I thought it was a really good visit a couple of weeks ago on a podcast that he hosts called it's the Empower Mississippi podcast. And I really appreciated the invitation. I want to say that publicly, Grant, and had a really good time visiting with you. How are you?
I'm great. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me on your show.
Absolutely. Let's start at the very beginning. You founded Empower Mississippi. What is the goal? What is this organization, this nonprofit? What's the goal with Empower Mississippi?
Yeah, we're 11 years in, and the mission is pretty simple. We want to create, and in some cases, continue the progress of making Mississippi a state where everyone can rise. So we think about, what are the things that stand in the way of people building a great life here in Mississippi? And what are those quality of life things that it takes to have a great life here? And so we think about that in terms of kind of our three pillars. These are not the only things that matter, but they're kind of three big areas that if you can get these right, they go a long way to making sure this is a great place for everybody. And those three pillars are education, work, and justice. So it's kind of what I say what I want for my kids is I want my kids to get a great education so they can find meaningful work and stay out of the justice system. And, if people end up behind bars, as many in Mississippi have and other places, we want to be a place where there's a path for you to rebuild your life.
It's hard to argue with those pillars. Let's start with education, because that has been very much a conversation, and you want to talk about passion. When people start talking about education, especially K-12 education in the state of Mississippi, you have significant opinions. Sometimes I wonder if my opinion being right gets in the way of what's best for children. The conversation is about school choice. Or at least that's the biggest conversation that's existing right now. But when we focus so much on school choice, we sometimes lose sight of the fact that there are some things that have happened that are very, very good for Mississippi and are happening in public schools and in private schools. And J.D. Vance even tweeted about that earlier this week, pointing to the success in Mississippi with some of the reading improvement. Now, there are others that will push back on that and say, no, it's not what the numbers say they are. But most everybody agrees that there has been significant progress in the education system in the state of Mississippi in recent years.
Yeah, that's right. And look, I am proud of the progress. We have seen, particularly in literacy, and I think largely because of the Literacy-Based Promotion Act of 2013, we've seen substantial growth in the number of kids that are reading on grade level, and that's huge. But let's step back a little bit. The goal for us, it's bigger than school choice. The goal is we want every child to have access to a great education. And in many parts of the state, parents do have access to a great education. We have some great public schools that are serving kids, where kids are thriving. They love what they're getting. They're being prepared for kind of what's next, whether that's college or career. Our problem is not that we don't have great public schools. Our problem is we don't have access to great education in every community, and sometimes even a highly rated public school that by all accounts is world-class is not meeting the needs of every child. And so our position is that in every community, in every corner of the state, parents need options, because only parents know their kids as well as they do. There's nobody else that can substitute for what parents know about their kids. And you're a dad, I'm a dad. I can tell you in ways that nobody else can today, tomorrow, next week, whether my kids are thriving, whether they're getting what they need, or whether we need to make a change in their educational setting. And every parent is that way. They know whether their kids are thriving or not. The problem is when a parent decides, for whatever reason, because it's a underperforming public school or a high-performing public school, but if a parent decides my kid is not thriving, I've got to make a change. You don't have a lot of options in Mississippi. You have very few.
You said one of the issues is that not every student is being served. That's a worthy goal. Is it a reasonable goal, though? I've had conversations with superintendents that say, look, at the top end, we are performing exceptionally well. We've got national merit semifinalists and national merit finalists and high ACT and SAT scorers and lots of scholarships and lots of AP programs, but we're trying to reach those kids also that are struggling. And sometimes that's because of language barrier, because of the diversity of our communities, and sometimes that's because of home situations. Is there a scenario where you can actually reach every child?
Of course not. And perfection is not the goal, but let's don't let perfection be the enemy of good. And even after all of our impressive literacy gains, when you look at the numbers, less than half the kids in the state are reading on grade level. So half the kids are not reading on grade level in our public school system.
That's 1 out of 2.
One out of 2.
If you're in 5th grade, you are not reading at a 5th grade level. 1
out of 2 kids are not reading on grade level. That's correct. And I'm not saying we don't you heard me. I'm celebrating the progress. I think the Mississippi Miracle is real, and I'm thrilled to see the scores that are being championed across the country, that Mississippi has made significant gains. But we don't have to rest on our laurels and say we've done enough. To me, the beauty of school choice, the secret sauce of school choice, is it forces everybody to be radically focused on the individual needs of kids, making sure kids get what they need. That doesn't mean they're all going to get it, but it does mean we have a better shot of more kids getting what they need. And the beauty is we don't have to choose to support choice or be against public schools. Choice is a great lifter, a great equalizer that has been demonstrated in a lot of other states and in reams of peer-reviewed research to help the kids who need it and the public school system that they may be opting out of or opting into a different school within. So it's not us versus them. Let's help individual kids who are falling behind. And in doing that, I'm convinced there's a lot of data to show that public schools are going to continue to rise even faster.
There was very much a debate in the legislature about school choice, but I feel like there were two sides to the debate. There was universal school choice, where parents have the ability to send their kids to any school, and then there was also district-to-district choice that was talked about. So within the public school system, if you are in a failing district and there is an opportunity where you can handle getting your kid to a better school district, then you have that option. At Empower Mississippi and with your leadership, is there one of those two that you support, or is that perfection versus good, like you were talking about a second ago?
Oh, we support all of that. Every state around us now, Louisiana, Arkansas, Tennessee, and Alabama, all have what you first mentioned as universal private choice, where any kid in the state can use public dollars to enroll in a private school if their needs are not being met. But let's be clear, really, honestly, this legislative session, universal was never on the table. There was not a universal school choice bill introduced. There were some very important but incremental steps towards giving parents more choice. But you mentioned kind of 2 buckets. I would say there are really 3. There's that. There is private choice. There is public school choice, district choice, which you mentioned, and there's charter school choice. And we supported bills that would have accomplished all 3 this year. None of those bills were our bills, but they were bills that we supported and championed and were excited about. And I think we made some important progress this year. It was just disappointing to see they didn't get further through the process.
When we come back, I would like for you to address something that we regularly get messages about, and that's the people that say this whole Mississippi Miracle thing is just fun with numbers. It's a joke. It's not actually a thing. Why is it that people are saying that? I'll give you a chance to answer that question when we come back. More with Grant Callen, founder and CEO of Empower Mississippi. This is Mornings with Richard Cross on SuperTalk Mississippi. Today on In a Mississippi Minute with Steve Azar, you'll hear an interview with Dr. William Lewis, who served many years as president of Pearl River Community College. In a Mississippi Minute with Steve Azar, presented by Superior Catfish. Remember, there's catfish, then there's Superior Catfish. It's U.S. farm-raised catfish that has homegrown flavor. Ask for it by name at your favorite store or restaurant, and go to superiorcatfish.com for more information. Grant Callen is my guest, founder and CEO at Empower Mississippi. So I laid it out before the break. We hear on an almost daily basis if the term Mississippi Miracle comes up or the advancements in reading statistics in Mississippi come up or are celebrated. There are people who go, oh, no, that's just fun with numbers. That's bunk. That's not actually going on. Why is it that people say that?
I don't know. I think it is probably people who either maybe their experience with where their kids are at is not working well for them, or it could be that they're just looking at the whole picture and saying we haven't arrived. There's more work to be done. But for the most part, I don't take a lot of. I would disregard that. Educators, people who have spent their life in education policy, recognize that the nation's report card, which is NAEP, National Assessment of Education Progress, is widely seen as a trusted, credible indicator of student progress. And it is NAEP that we have seen so many advances in, particularly fourth grade reading. And the progress is real. Not just in whole progress, but when you look at particularly our African American students have seen some of the most growth in any state in the nation, and their outcomes are they've passed the national average, and they're beginning to be some of the greatest outcomes in the nation. So there is real progress that is worthy of celebration. And I think we do a disservice to these kids that have worked hard, these families that are supporting them, teachers who are the ones standing in front of them every day trying to help create better outcomes for kids. We do a disservice if we can't celebrate progress along the way, even while recognizing there's more work to be done.
One concern that I have, and it's something that we've talked about with education leaders as we visited on the show, is the focus on testing outcomes versus teaching for learning.
Yeah, and I think that's real. I think 15 or so years ago, Mississippi moved to an accountability system, this A through F accountability system that is, in my mind, it's a bit too dependent on test scores instead of looking at the whole picture of what goes into student success. And I think it was needed. It was kind of a needed shift in accountability. But, as happens sometimes in public policy, the pendulum swings too far. And so what it has done, in my view, is it has crowded out other things, other subject areas, other important factors in a kid's education that are not easy to measure on a test. And so there's a lot of things that we don't include in this accountability model that should. One of the factors that we'd like to see added to the accountability model is parent satisfaction. Do parents feel like their kids are thriving in their school? That's a critically important factor in private schools that determine whether parents stay. Are they satisfied? Do they feel like their kids are getting what they need? Some states include that in the way they assess the performance of public schools. But the problem is, by being so dependent on test scores, and particularly growth scores, not proficiency, you have a situation where you have today, which is, I think we have 139 school districts, and literally there's only 3 in the entire state that are rated D or F. Everybody else is an A, B, or C. And while we have made great progress, we're not going to continue to make great progress if everybody gets a trophy, everybody's A, B, or C, without regard for sort of where those kids really are. So I think there's work to be done to improve that system.
Last thing, we've only got a minute and a half left, and certainly want to continue this conversation. When you hear the argument that private school choice as part of the school choice conversation is nothing more than modern day segregation in the state of Mississippi. How do you respond to that?
Man, I just think that is that's somebody who doesn't really have a good argument for how do we talk about what's going on. So in many parts of the state, our public schools are already segregated, not by mandate, but because our neighborhoods are often segregated. Now, there are great outliers, and I would say Clinton is a tremendous outlier where they have a high-performing school, great diversity. There's a lot of diversity in Madison, but what we're talking about is helping make sure kids can find a setting that works for them, whether they are white kids, black kids, Asian, it doesn't matter. We want all kids to have an opportunity to rise. And choice has demonstrated that it actually increases diversity, not decreases it.
Grant, we unfortunately have got to leave it there for today. I hope we can continue the conversation soon.
I look forward to it. Thank you, Richard.
Grant Callen, founder and CEO of Empower Mississippi. 8 o'clock hour is coming up. We'll start things off with former Congressman Greg Harper. We'll talk with him on some of his impressions of what is happening in Washington, D.C. with this tariff conversation. We're back right after this.